Success of the US-led campaign hinges in part on the newly unified Iraqi government. Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi, who replaced Nouri al-Maliki in August, faces the task of bringing the Sunni minority back into the political process. Well, joining us now is Ambassador Sumaida'ie. Ambassador Sumaida'ie served as Iraq's first ambassador to the United States for 15 years. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. Before we get to the internal politics of Iraq, we have another declaration of war. The United States looking for another coalition of the willing right now. How did we get to this? I mean, there has been violence in Iraq for a long time, but there was a tipping point, wasn't there?
Yes, I think the tipping point came with ISIS beheading American citizens and doing that publicly. And I think that influenced public opinion in this country and created pressure for the government the American government to do something about it. Pressure was building up before, from the time when ISIS took over Mosul and looked like they were advancing towards Erbil and towards Baghdad. There was alarm, of course, and it looked like the situation in Iraq was unraveling. So that pressure was building up, and I think the turning point came with the public beheading of American citizens.
There is a conference now taking place in Paris. Something like 40 nations are involved in that conference to discuss support for Baghdad. What do you expect to come out of that?
A lot of good intentions and maybe some military support to the Iraqi government and the Kurdish regional government. Most of them, of course, all of them have said that they are not interested in sort of boots on the ground situation, but it is a significant amount of support that the Iraqi government can look forward to and can capitalize on.
Let's look at the political situation inside Iraq right now. You have the new Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi. He's announced a new government. It is a government that is being touted as one which is more inclusive. It has a Sunni vice president. This is not the first time that there are Sunnis in government, of course. Nouri al-Maliki had Sunnis in government.
Exactly.
So what's changed?
Well, what's changed is Abadi is not Maliki. Although he's from the same political party, the same ideology, but there are two quite important differences. One is that Abadi's background is better educated, lived in the West, in the UK for significant part of his life. He knows how things work on the international scale, on the international stage. So he is not Maliki is a very important factor. The other factor is the change which has taken place on the ground. He takes over when Maliki's policies have failed spectacularly. There is universal agreement that what he was doing was wrong. And this agreement, by the way, is not only international, but inside Iraq, even within his own coalition, even within his own party. So Maliki was condemned, and Abadi has the goodwill to build on. Everybody is wishing him to succeed, but myself included.
Is al-Abadi going to actually give Sunnis real power to exercise? Because that didn't happen under Nouri al-Maliki.
Well, this is the big question. I hope he does. A lot of people are hoping he does. The only hope for Iraq is that he will. So we wait and see. Crucial things. Well, there are certain litmus tests. How he is going to fill the crucial ministries of defense and interior.
Why were they not filled? I mean, these, as you say, are crucial ministries.
They are very important, and Maliki wanted to keep them in his hands. And in fact, when this new government was declared, and we noticed that these two governments were not filled, you know, the thought that came to my mind is, here we go again. It is not a good sign, but if he manages to fill them quickly, that would be a good step. And the litmus test will be how he deals with issues of detainees, how he deals with... he has given out some good signals, like, for example, giving instructions to the army not to blanket bomb civilian areas. These are good gestures, but these have to be translated into actions, particularly about reconstituting the security forces in a way that they are not seen and perceived to be biased against Sunnis.
If we look at the international involvement in what is taking place in Iraq right now, we had the British Prime Minister David Cameron, who did not give any clear commitment to joining the US airstrikes on Iraq, but he did say that US forces will go after those who killed very brutally that British aid worker. He was beheaded as well. Let's take a listen to what David Cameron said. Let's watch this.
We have to confront this menace. Step by step, we must drive back, dismantle and ultimately destroy ISIL and what it stands for. We will do so in a calm, deliberate way, but with an iron determination. We will not do so on our own, but by working closely with our allies, not just the United States and in Europe, but also in the region. This is not about British combat troops on the ground. It is about working with others to extinguish this terrorist threat.
Are we hearing a lot of words there and not much commitment?
But what's significant here is that these words are almost identical to the words used by President Obama. Degrade and ultimately destroy. And the determination part. I think he's falling in line. I think the objectives are converging. And this convergence is good. We need it. But everybody has to realize that this ISIS phenomena, ISIL or whatever you call it, cannot be tackled by just bombarding the country from the air.
Right.
It's got to be, we've got to have a strategy which includes dealing with the situation on the ground and ultimately dealing with the ideology that propels them.
You know, we hear from David Cameron, we hear from Barack Obama that they will carry out airstrikes, but there will be no actual combat troops on the ground. There will be combat troops on the ground, but they will come from other countries, mainly regional countries. But we already see some cracks there. You know, for instance, Turkey says we don't want to get involved in this. Egypt says we don't want to get involved in this to the extent that, you know, the United States wants them to get involved.
Well, each country had or has its reasons. Turkey, as you know, has hostages. Its consulate in Mosul was taken over by ISIS, and I believe 49 hostages are with, and the Turks are very, very cautious. The Egyptians might have different reasons. They are going through their own counterinsurgency or counterterrorism phase. So, and there is also another dimension. Everybody wants to avoid the perception of a sectarian war.
Right.
The Iraqi government doesn't want Arab soldiers who might be perceived to be Sunnis giving aid to Sunnis. I remember when we were at the governing council, the Americans came to us and said, we want to bring in Turkish troops to help us as part of the coalition. The Kurds objected to that at that time. And the rest of the governing council stood with the Kurds because there are sensitivities at that time. There were sensitivities at that time between the Kurds and the Turks. The Americans offered to locate the Turkish troops in other areas, but still they were rejected. So the local sensitivities have to be taken into account.
All right, I've got 10 seconds, very quick answer to this. Should Iran, and to a lesser extent Syria, be involved in this coalition against Islamic State?
I think, look, Syria is, I cannot do this in 10 seconds, but in Syria there's a three-cornered fight. And I don't believe the Syrian regime should be part of this coalition. Because
what about the Iranians?
The Iranians have to be dealt with, but possibly at an arm's length and not part of the core coalition.
Ambassador, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.